been telling you about the problem. How Obama admits he's allowing the border to collapse to create a crisis so he can form the SPP, the North American Union. Senator Kyle on record. How they're blocking the oil relief and not letting it be cleaned up, waiting for the hurricanes to blow it in to create a bigger crisis. Obama will be politically destroyed, but the globalists don't care. We've covered how the Financial Times of London and others are reporting Obama is in free fall and needs a staged terror attack like Oklahoma City or 9/11 to, quote, be a strong leader, to make us rally around him like a bunch of, scared children. We know all over the country, every day I see reports where they're announcing they're laying off a third, a half, or more of the police and saying the police are only allowed to revenue generate. We will not respond to robberies, to muggings, to home invasions, buy a gun. At least in Ohio and Michigan where they've announced this, they're saying buy a gun. Not in California. They're saying you're not going to have a gun. We're going to try to restrict that, and we're not going to protect you unless you accept higher taxes. They raise the taxes, and the economy implodes. They know it's going to do that. And they want to get all the parasites and all the dependents and all the little thugs that enjoy their petty power through the system and the uniforms that they animate. They want to get them all riled up and scared so that they will go along with the oppression that's coming. They are going to shut off the power. They are going to increase the water prices. They are going to drive you into submission. They've done this in the third world. It's called shock therapy. This is a stated program, 100%, and we know what they are doing. And it is treason. It is outrageous. Those police officers should walk off the force and say, we're going to protest until you say that we're going to respond to crime. Again, we have triple the cops we had 15 years ago conservatively. They're trying to expand them again with taxpayer money, and you can't get a cop when you need one most of the time in these big mega cities. A lot of towns are still decent. Austin, when I've needed the police, they've come out and been very nice and done a good job. But more and more in other areas of the country, we see where you call the police to your house because there's been a break-in and they taser and beat up an old woman on squad car video. And in this latest case, they did the right thing and fired the cops. But who are these lunatics they're hiring? We obviously need police. I know it's a tough job, but we need a smaller, lean, focused, serious force that tracks down violent offenders and keeps them in jail. I mean, now in Oakland, here's the bigger issue. What happens when the Oakland police chief announces they won't respond to burglary, theft, embezzlement, grand theft auto, grand theft dog, identity theft, extortion, attempted extortion, expose poison to another, vandalism? What is that message? I mean, it's almost like Devil's Night or something in Detroit, where all the criminals go out and burn things at once so the police can't respond. This is the police saying, we're going to take a hike. Just like New Orleans, instead the cops were tying chains to jewelry stores and pawn shops, stealing guns and jewelry and dragging safes down the road behind them, and going into Walmart and kicking everybody out looting so the cops can walk out with big screen TVs. I'm not here bashing police. I know they're the good, the bad, and the ugly. They're a mix like everybody else. But they recruit slime. They recruit scum. They recruit people with low IQs. That's on record in many police departments. You can't have above an average IQ. Because with wisdom, most of the time comes decency and people being honorable. They want a bunch of dumb goons they can manipulate. And then if you get sick at a 9/11 rescue or you get sick cleaning up oil and you're begging for help as a cop, you're not going to get it. And once you're not a cop anymore, and once you're out of the military and the internal documents, you're the #1 enemy. You're who the NSA is watching. You're the people they hate. It's time for everyone to make a decision and decide which side do you stand for. Which side are you on? The good news is there's a huge awakening to all this. But the larger question is, what are some things we can do that are real world to counter this? And we'll talk about that after this break and have Jaron Neihard in here with an amazing story he told me this morning, something I experienced last week. Then we've got Richard Reeves coming up, Larry Pratt, and we'll have some time in the middle of the next hour to take phone calls. Please stay with us. The websites are Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. Now, I want to get into solutions in the rest of this segment, and then more coming up later in the hour after Richard Reeves leaves us, but that's also a big part of the solution when he's going to be here talking about what the biggest issue is, being awake. And the A big part of that is realizing how much power the individual has. The establishment wouldn't be moving to curtail the internet and openly censor, quote, conspiracy theories, and they give the example at the White House and FCC of denying man-made global warming, or denying the official story of 9/11, or denying the official story of Oklahoma City, or denying WMDs. Or they call it a conspiracy theory that China sells organs when China's on record saying they do. These are the things the State Department and the FCC and the diversity czar at the White House have all said. It's what Cass Sunstein, the regulations czar, has said. Why would they want to start shutting down free speech and curtailing talk radio free speech with the Fairness Doctrine if we weren't having an effect? And I'm only one person in this fight against the New World Order. The real power of this radio broadcast is you taking action. And if we're able to expose that the private central banks orchestrated the collapse, if we're able to expose their line about WMDs with Iran, just like they did 7 years ago with Iraq, if we're able to expose the fact that they're holding us hostage with the open borders and that it's their policy to have them open, their arrogance is what's going to undo them, that Obama admits he wants the crisis to get worse, that they're trying to bankrupt states with unfunded mandates so they can be federalized and thus internationalized. All of this is admitted. And they want you to feel powerless. But, ladies and gentlemen, I know the power of the individual. 15 years ago, when I first got on air, I just wanted to fight for the Second Amendment, be one voice of millions. I never had any imagination of even having a radio show. Did an access show for a few months. Local station went to talk. They said, we'd like to give you a Saturday show. It got a lot of listeners and ratings. They gave me a weekday show. Then it got syndicated 13 years ago. That's another example. When I started Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com, I had no intention of them being the #1 alternative websites, #1 and #2 in the world, and growing exponentially. But it just shows with how if you just start resisting in a small way, that's how you'll get better. And there's so many of us that we're unstoppable if we take action. Now, again, think about just what I've done. With the films, hundreds and hundreds of millions of free views online. That's what I value, is waking people up. The Obama Deception, Fall of the Republic, Endgame, all of these films, Invisible Empire, Truth Rising, Loose Change Final Cut that I produced, all of that, hundreds and hundreds of millions conservatively. I have more than 8 YouTube channels with more than 150 million views between them, not counting the thousands of other channels and hundreds of millions of views. That's just with YouTube, and we use other tools, talk radio, everything, the news websites. Think of what we've done, and here's just a few examples of why enemy operatives, COINTELPRO, are revealing themselves in the fake patriot movement, that is areas that are fake, in the mainstream media, multiple Bilderberg Group journalists openly attacking me every week at international publications saying I'm a dangerous enemy because I've analyzed their attack profile, I know what they're doing, and I know how to stop them. Now, here's just an example of the power of the individual and how it ties together with you, the listeners. How it ties together with you, the power. The reason this show has power is because I take action, we put out quality information, but that's a small part of the equation. You magnify it 1 billion times. No exaggeration. 1 billion times conservatively, you magnify what I do. And an example of that is I came in here last week and told the crew and then said on air that it was weird. I was listening to a syndicated show out of San Antonio, and they were talking about me in a positive way. And then I flipped the channel to 590 AM, and the Todd and Don show had a caller call in and say they want to censor the internet. The world government's taking over. They want to shut down Alex Jones. And, you know, the local host made a joke about it. But the point is that was just in a few minutes of listening, I was tuning channel to channel. Jaron called me this morning at about 9. He said, you won't believe what just happened to me this morning, because he'd just woken up and he was dazed by it because every piece of media, his cell phone, his computer, his radio, it was all Alex Jones. No matter what he flipped to, not twice in a row, 3 times in a row. And that's an example of you, the callers, just calling in to talk radio and the type of magnification that it is having and the buzz that it is creating. If we take that model and you do that yourself in your own town, your own city, it may just be a buzz on your block. It may be a buzz in your town or your state. Resistance is victory. And I want to go to Jaron Neihart and talk about this. Jaron, briefly tell folks what happened this morning.
Yeah, actually, I woke up about 8 o'clock. I always set my alarm clock to 93.7, a local show here in town, Dudley and Bob. and a caller actually called in asking if they could get you on the show. They were talking about the FCC ruling, the ruling against the FCC. They went on for about 5 minutes saying, yeah, we should have them back in and talking about you. I turned that off, loaded up the Joe Rogan podcast, which is always a staple, started listening to that. At the same time, I got a text message from my sister saying, this is all at 8 o'clock in the morning, Case 101, another local show here in town, was talking about you. As I was reading that, I said to myself, look, I got to go listen to Case 101, see if they're still talking about it. And as I did that, Joe Rogan's on his podcast talking about you, doing an impression actually, but talking about you. It almost short-circuited me for a second. The thing was, he's got people on his podcast, a UFC guy, Eddie Bravo. They all talk about you like just Alex. Hey, Alex does this, Alex does this, and everybody seems to know. It was the same thing on KLBJ when I heard it. I didn't hear the Case 101 part, but they just talk about, yeah, Alex comes in, Alex does this, and it's almost like just everybody's aware.